time is just gone 16 minutes past 9 a.m. and it's time now to look at what is taking place in Ukraine. And we know the UN General Assembly had passed a resolution demanding Russia withdraw from Ukraine. And although this was an overwhelmingly adopted resolution demanding this withdrawal or the immediate withdrawal, there are countries that had abstained. And one of the countries that had abstained is South Africa. We have learned that 141 of the 193 United Nations member states voted for the non-binding resolution. And joining us this morning is Sandile Swana, who is a political analyst. Sandile, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yes, wonderful that you are able to join us this morning, and we do appreciate you taking time out, Sandile. Let's talk about the UN General Assembly looking at South Africa. Now, we know last week I had the opportunity of talking with the Ukrainian ambassador to South Africa, and the point he had made is with regard to South Africa, and South Africa needs to take a position on the matter. And looking at where South Africa is, our position as far as this conflict is concerned, just your thoughts that we have decided to abstain in voting for this resolution.
Thank you so much, Hayat, and your listeners and viewers. You have to situate the decision by South Africa to abstain in its proper historical context. The historical context, first of all, is that South Africa, when they started the current ruling party and the liberation movement in South Africa broadly, the first step to try and launch the armed struggle and the broader struggle against apartheid, they went to the United States to ask for help. And they never got that help from the West. They eventually got that help from Russia to launch the struggle against apartheid. The United States and the UK, over the years, since 1948, have continuously supported apartheid South Africa, the government of South Africa, which was an apartheid government, which then aligned with the anti-USSR forces, international forces. In that movement, South Africa again, through the ANC, aligned itself with a non-aligned movement together with India and others to say, we will not take sides in the fight between the Soviet Union and the Western powers, NATO, and so on. So this stand that South Africa took in the United Nations and elsewhere to say, we will not support any particular side, but we will ask for people to negotiate peacefully and find solutions using rational common sense. So that stand is old. There's nothing inconsistent for the past, call it 70 years. There's nothing inconsistent that South Africa has done right now.
Yes, and also, Sandile, I think one needs to look at it in terms of the colonial past, and not only South Africa and the African continent. And we must remember that when we talk about colonizing of Africa, it has been the European nations that have colonized and that have contributed a lot to the misery that the continent has found itself in, and to a large extent, South Africa has been affected as well. And when one looks at this conflict between Ukraine and Russia, a lot of it is driven by national interests between the West, NATO, the EU, and on the other hand, Russia. So when we're talking about, national interests overshadowing international law, the South African position to basically remain neutral in this entire debacle and to abstain in voting for this resolution makes a lot of sense.
Yes, I think we have to understand that, there's the other issue that we have not discussed here, because Ukraine and Russia have a long history, at least going back to the 1700s, where basically they formed the same political union among themselves. And Nikita Khrushchev was actually from Ukraine, who was actually at some point the president, if you like, of Russia, of the Soviet Union. So these people have been in union together before. And another thing to consider is that this conflict is not new. This conflict in the recent period, you can go back to 2014 and so on and so forth, where these Europeans started to launch sanctions against Russia in connection with Crimea. But what happened there is that when they launched agricultural sanctions, Putin was able to make Russia self-sufficient in all agricultural products and then incorporate Central Europe into his agricultural system as export destinations. It actually made the unification of Central and Eastern Europe more despite from NATO side. So there is a lot of effort by NATO, the United Kingdom and the USA to try and westernize Eastern Europe and Central Europe in this. That is part of this conflict. In the same way that they've been trying to westernize Africa, to westernize Asia culturally, politically, and linguistically, we are now conducting this interview as Africans in Africa in English because we are being continuously westernized. And part of this conflict is about those elements within Ukraine who want to submit to westernization. And westernization, Western imperialism, Western colonization, and all of those processes.
Yes. Now, also looking at where we are at this point in time, and obviously historically, as you mentioned, looking at Russia and its support to the liberation struggle in South Africa, and looking at where we are in terms of our relationship as it stands with the West, with Europe, with the likes of the United States of America versus Russia. We know we are part of BRICS. And that also is absolutely important. That is critical to understand in the context of this UN resolution and the abstention of South Africa in voting.
Yes, you will be aware from a South African perspective that India, the nation of India, was probably the first nation that wanted resolutions against apartheid to be launched in the United Nations. And they persisted in that over several decades and succeeded in that struggle. And they are part of BRICS. Russia also maintained active support to the liberation struggle of South Africa right through until 1994. And after 1994, the BRICS movement has been there. And as far as I know, China as well has maintained a stand that does not attack Russia in this particular situation. That is not to say the BRICS members will encourage Russia to abuse anybody's human rights, etc., etc. But the BRICS movement is basically saying you need another power block, another source of wisdom in world affairs. That is not only the US-led Western type of thinking. So it's not to say people are advising others to attack others. No, that's not the point. The point is to say there are other types of wisdom that need to be employed. So South Africa is standing at this point in time firmly with BRICS and firmly with the old non-aligned movement, if you like, or the second and the third world peoples of the world.
Yes, so it's obvious that this is not only about this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. There are many other issues. There are many other geopolitical issues that are actually playing out in the background. And one of them, you're talking about the non-aligned states. You're talking about BRICS as well. Because for a very, very long time, we've seen organizations like the EU. We've seen even organizations like the World Bank, the IMF, that have basically dominated. And when one looks at South Africa, when one looks at the African continent, that has been held hostage by a lot of these institutions, like the International Monetary Fund, like the World Bank as well, and all of this encouraged by the Western Union, for want of a better term, the West, and also Europe in general.
Yes, that is why I'm saying we have to accept that. If people were to sober up for a few minutes and say, yes, there are many issues, even relationships with our former colonial masters in the West, led by the United States, the UK, and the European Union, that we need to renegotiate all these arrangements. And they need to accept, the Western powers in general need to accept that there is wisdom outside of their bloc in Africa in Asia, in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe, and so on and so forth, and show a little bit of respect. The idea that the US Marine and the forces of France and Germany and so on can defeat everybody at any given time and impose their will, that idea needs to be challenged and eventually neutralized.
And also, I think what is a major concern is the racist nature, and particularly looking at Western media. And this seems to be featuring very, very strongly. We've heard it over and over again about blonde hair, blue eyes, people that are fleeing from Ukraine, could be your next door neighbor. These are ordinary families. And, we've seen so much made out of this by the Western media, where we've seen in the past, we've seen all the problems in Africa, we've seen refugee crisis right across the entire world, but we've never seen the reaction to that like what we are seeing at this point in time, Sandile.
Probably you will find that as we speak today, there's more than 40 wars going on in the world today. And the only war that is being advertised or promoted in the media is the war in the Ukraine, because that war, it appears as if people who are approved as proper humans with blonde hair and blue eyes are being shot at by Russian forces, who are also, by the way, also some of them have got the blonde hair and some have got blue eyes in any event. And you will know that the philosophies of Europe have produced two world wars. War is in Western Europe is embedded, part of their philosophy, among themselves and against the people of Africa, the people of Latin America, if you like, South America, and Asia. So this idea that refugees who are white will be received into Poland, who are so-called white, by the way, it was a very controversial concept, even this idea of being white, was Muslims, Arabs, and other Africans and other nationalities and other religious groups are being blocked, physically blocked, from running away from actual active war in that particular region of Ukraine, Poland, and so on. So that is very worrying because it manifests the age-old problem of so-called white supremacy and white privilege, even in the discussion of international affairs. That is a very worrisome development right now.
Yes, and just finally looking at where we are, as you know, South Africa is now abstained. In your analysis, what should the South African position be right now?
The South African position should continue in its tradition, first of all. Russia has been our ally. BRICS is our ally. We are members of BRICS. The non-aligned movement of old has been what actually liberated us. We cannot divorce ourselves from the liberation struggle of the world, whether they are conducted by Cuba and so on and so on. That's one. Two, South Africa can offer and we're capable of offering services of mediation and conflict resolution and negotiating trade and other things to find non-violent solutions. And we need to call upon the United States to refrain from promoting wars all over the world, and in this case, in the Ukraine region, more specifically.
Well, Sandile, thank you very much for that, for taking time out and talking to us this morning. We wish you all the best, and please take care.
Thank you so much.
Sandile Swana, a political analyst, with us this morning against the background of the UN resolution where South Africa had abstained. The time is just gone 9:30 a.m. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back.